Hello, students. This is step 1 of chapter 12. This chapter covers DIVs and floating elements, and we're going to learn how to section things on a web page. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the page looks like in Notepad++. So the actual HTML page is sectioned off into DIVs. DIVs is a term that means division, dividing the page. So we have several DIVs here. The first DIV is the header, that section right there. The second DIV is called main, the main section of the page, and that covers this whole entire area here. This one's quite big. The third DIV is called sidebar, that covers this section right here. And then the last DIV is called footer, and that's this section right here. So you have 4 sections. Let me show you how they look on the page. This is the Starbuzz page. It looks a little different. This section up here is the header section. This section in the middle is the main DIV. This section down here with the bag is the sidebar DIV, and that's going to float on the side in a minute. And the last DIV, which you can't really see that well on this page because I've scrolled down to the bottom, but it's down here. It contains the trademark information and dates and all that stuff. That's the footer DIV, okay? And because it's sectioned off into DIVs, we can control the style of each one of these DIVs. So what we did is we gave style to the header here, and we added style to the main DIV here. We added style to the sidebar DIV here, and we added style to the footer DIV here. We have other style here as well to the body and H1s and such, but once you section off a page into DIVs, you can control those DIVs individually. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to float this sidebar DIV on the side of main DIV. In order for that to happen, the sidebar element needs to be placed directly under the header. So whatever you're floating needs to be on top of what you're floating it with. So in this case, we need to move the sidebar DIV, which is this DIV right here. So we'll grab it from open DIV sidebar to close DIV, and I'm going to Control X, which cuts it, keeps it in my clipboard, and I'm going to place it directly under the header DIV right here. Control V will paste it. Now you'll notice that instead of header main sidebar, it's header sidebar main. Now I'm going to Control S, and you will see a difference on the page. When I refresh, now the sidebar is on top of main. So now what we need to do is we need to go to the CSS code for Starbuzz, and we need to change the sidebar code a little bit. So we find sidebar here. The last code we had was margin. Okay. Margin is set to 0, 10, 10, 10. And we're going to add a width style, width, colon, and we're going to make the width 280 px. And when you start working with floating elements, you might need to play around with the width, because if the width isn't just right, it won't have enough room to float on the side. So we need to make the width 280. We'll put a semicolon here, and we'll add one more element to make it float. Call this one float, and we want to float it on the right-hand side of main. So click float right. Control S, and now when we refresh the page, sidebar floats to the right of main, but it still doesn't look right, so we still have some tweaking to do. Notice how it hovers over the footer. Over here you can see the footer now. Sidebar hovers over the footer. It kind of incorporates itself inside the main element, which doesn't look quite right. So we'll fix all of this. So one of the things we need to do is we need to adjust the margin on main. So you'll see margin right now is 0, 10. So remember, this works like a clock. 0 is top, so there's no margin at the top. There's 10 pixels on the right, 10 pixels on the bottom, and 10 pixels on the left. We're going to touch this. We're going to change this to, and I'm going to highlight this so I can get it all. And we're going to change the left. We're going to keep the left. Excuse me. We're going to keep the top at 0 px. We're going to change the right to 330 px. Remember, the margin on the right brings main over to the left, okay? And then we're going to keep the 10 px for bottom, and we'll keep the 10 px for left. So let's see what that does. Control S. We'll go back and refresh the page. There we go. Now that looks a little nicer. Okay, but we still have this overlap here on footer with sidebar. So we're going to take care of that. So you accomplish that by clearing the right-hand side. Clearing will allow this footer to be underneath sidebar. So we're going to clear that float. Okay, so we're going to go back to CSS, and we're going to go to the footer. And we're going to change, or we're going to add a style called clear right. So this will clear that sidebar div. Control S. And now when I refresh the page, you can see that the footer is now underneath both elements. Okay, so now as you can see here, this page is styled up pretty well. Okay, there's a lot of style applied to this sheet. So let's see what it would look like without style. Okay, so I'm going to go back to index.html, and I'm going to break the link. I'm just going to put starbuzz 123, because there's no such thing as starbuzz 123, and I'll Control S and then refresh the page just to show you what this page would look like without style. So here we go. Okay, as you can see, there's been a lot of work done to this page to make it look the way it does. Okay. So now I'm going to go back and retrieve the style by getting rid of the 1, 2, 3. I think I'm missing. No, I'm all set. Control S, and then refresh the page, and I have my style back. Okay, so that's what that looks like. So this will end step 1. Thanks for watching.